When a man carries your bag for 25 years, walks every fairway, reads every green, calms you down after every bad shot, and then one day he's just gone, that's not a business decision. That's a betrayal. You probably remember the headlines from 2017. Mutual decision. Right time for a change. Phil's brother Tim takes over. Bones goes to NBC. Everyone moves on. Except nobody really moved on. Because that story you heard? That was the polished version. The one the PR machine wanted you to believe. The real story stayed buried for years, until Alan Shipnuck's unauthorized biography finally blew it wide open. And what came out was ugly. Not the dramatic blow-up you'd expect. Not a screaming match on the 18th green. Nothing cinematic. Instead, it was quiet. An email. A few sentences. A phone call that ended one of the greatest partnerships in golf history. Here's the thing about 25 years. You don't walk away from that over nothing. So what actually happened? Why did Bones really leave? What was on that phone call? And most importantly, did Phil ever make it right? Let me tell you the real story. The one they never wanted you to hear. But before we get into it, here's my question to you. Do you think loyalty in sports means anything anymore? Drop your take in the comments. And if you actually care about the real stories behind the headlines, hit that subscribe button. Now let's get into it. Pick up any golf history book from the 90s through the 2010s, and one name appears next to Phil Mickelson more than any other. Jim Bones Mackay. It started in 1992 at the Memphis Open. Bones was 27, still figuring out the caddy game. Phil was 22, a left-handed prodigy with a smile that could sell anything. Something clicked between them, and from that moment, they were inseparable. 25 years. That's not a working relationship. That's a marriage. Bones was at Phil's wedding. Phil was at Bones's. When Phil finally broke through at the 2004 Masters, his first major after years of heartbreak, Bones was right there. Tears streaming down his face, holding the bag, holding the moment. When Phil won the 2013 British Open, his fifth major, Bones was the first person he hugged. The world saw partnership, friendship, brotherhood. And for a long time it was. But here's where the story gets complicated. Behind the smiles and the trophies, something was shifting. Bones wasn't just carrying Phil's bag, he was carrying Phil's stress, his doubts, his anger on bad days. Every caddy will tell you the same thing. 10% of the job is clubs. 90% is managing a grown man's emotions. Bones did that brilliantly. For 25 years, through Phil's choke jobs, through the near misses, through the steroid accusations, through the insider trading scandal that cost Phil sponsorships and reputation, Bones never complained publicly, not once. He just showed up. Every tournament, every practice round, every early morning, rain or shine. That's what made the ending so shocking, because if anyone deserved loyalty, it was Bones Mackay. And yet, something was happening underneath the surface. Small signs that most fans never noticed. Little moments that, in hindsight, were warning lights flashing red. One story stands out. After Phil won the 2013 British Open, he signed the 18th hole flag and gave it to Bones. Standard tradition, a symbol of gratitude. Except Phil signed it in comically large letters. As one insider later put it, the gesture felt dismissive, like the achievement was Phil's alone, like Bones's contribution was being minimized. It seemed small, a flag, but to a man who had sacrificed 25 years of his life for someone else's dream, that flag meant something. And when it was handed over that way, it left a mark, a crack, barely visible at first, but cracks have a way of spreading. Because the real problem wasn't a flag. It was never about a flag. The real problem was sitting on a ledger sheet. Money. That's what this always comes down to, isn't it? But what you're about to hear goes way beyond a simple paycheck dispute. Let's talk about Phil Mickelson's money and how it disappeared. Between 2010 and 2014, Phil's estimated gambling losses reached somewhere around $40 million. $40 million. In 4 years. Now, Phil earned roughly $40 million per year during that stretch. On paper, he could afford it. But after taxes, after management fees, after the lifestyle of a superstar athlete, things got tight. Add in the insider trading case involving Billy Walters. Phil reportedly made nearly $1 million on a stock tip. He had to give it back, plus interest, plus legal fees, plus the reputational damage that cost him sponsorships. By the mid-2010s, Phil was feeling the squeeze, and that squeeze had consequences. Here's the part most fans don't know. Under the PGA Tour's old FedEx Cup structure, bonus money was often deferred. paid into retirement accounts. Caddies, who typically get 10% of a player's winnings plus a percentage of bonuses, suddenly found their compensation thrown into limbo. What used to be a fixed percentage became a negotiation. And Phil? He allegedly wasn't paying Bones what he was owed. Shipnuck's biography puts the number at roughly $900,000. That's nearly $1 million in back pay. Wages owed to the man who had carried Phil's bag for 2.5 decades. Think about what that means. Every tournament, every win, every major, Bones was there, walking 18 holes, carrying a 40-pound bag, reading greens, calming Phil down when his temper flared, telling him what club to hit. And for all of that, Phil couldn't write the check. Now, you might be thinking, maybe Bones didn't ask. Maybe he was too loyal to demand what he was owed. That's the thing about loyalty. People mistake it for weakness. They assume that because you don't complain, you must be fine with how you're being treated. Bones wasn't fine. He just didn't want to make it public. But privately, the resentment was building, tournament after tournament, year after year. Watching Phil spend money on private jets, on gambling, on everything except the man who helped him earn it. That's a dangerous game to play with someone who knows all your secrets. And Bones knew everything. Every tournament, every practice round, every private conversation in the locker room. Phil's mood swings, his doubts, his fears, the moments when he thought he couldn't win again. Bones was there for all of it. And then came the moment that changed everything. June 2017, the Memorial Tournament. One of the most respected events on the PGA Tour calendar. A week that should have been about golf. Instead, it became the week a 25-year partnership quietly died. What happened next wasn't a fight. It wasn't a blow-up. It wasn't anything dramatic. It was an email. Bones sent a statement to a group of veteran golf writers. Short, professional, devastating. We felt it was time for a change. That was it. No specifics, no blame, no drama. Just the quiet end of something that had defined both their lives for a quarter century. The golf world was stunned. Even other caddies couldn't believe it. Mike "Fluff" Cowan said he was shocked. They didn't really say anything, he recalled. But here's what everyone missed. Bones didn't leave Phil. Bones fired Phil, the caddy, the employee, the guy who carried the bag. He walked away from a man who had more money than he could ever spend. A man who could have fixed everything with a single phone call and a single check. But Phil didn't make that call. And Bones was done waiting. So what did that phone call actually sound like? The one that finally sealed it? I'm about to tell you, and trust me, it's not what you think. The truth is, there wasn't one dramatic phone call. It was quieter than that. Bones sent his statement. The writers published it. And then, nothing. No phone call from Phil asking why. No late-night conversation trying to save the relationship. No apology, no negotiation, just silence. When reporters tried to reach Bones, he declined to talk. One writer texted him asking for a call. Bones replied that he preferred to lay low for a while. And there was a mood of dejection and some hurt in his words. He was devastated. But he wasn't going to beg. Phil, for his part, did eventually send something. 2 checks totaling $800,000. And he overnighted the flags from all their major wins. But remember, the debt was around $900,000. So even in the end, Phil shortchanged him by $100,000. That's not a mistake. That's a statement. A final message that said, "This is what I think you're worth. Take it or leave it." Bones took it. What else could he do? There was no written contract. Caddies don't get contracts. They get handshake agreements. They get trust. And when that trust breaks, they have no legal recourse. Bones couldn't sue, couldn't fight, couldn't do anything except accept the money and move on. And move on he did. But what happened next might surprise you, because Bones's story didn't end with that check. A couple of weeks after the split, Bones's phone rang. It was NBC. They wanted him on the broadcast team. On-course commentary. He took it, and he was brilliant. Fans loved him. Players respected him. For 4 years, Bones became one of the most respected voices in golf media. Then, in 2021, another phone call. This time from Justin Thomas. The young star wanted Bones on his bag, full-time, and Bones said yes. Immediately, he was back in the winner's circle. The 2022 PGA Championship, Thomas's second major. Bones was right there, just like he'd been for Phil, except this time was different. After the win, Justin Thomas gave Bones the 18th hole flag, signed it, but Thomas signed it with respect. With gratitude, Bones kept that flag, and he knew exactly what it meant because he'd been given the same flag years earlier by Phil, signed in giant letters that seemed to erase Bones's contribution. One player made his caddy feel small, the other made him feel seen. And what about Phil? Where did he go after Bones left? The answer tells you everything. Phil put his brother Tim on the bag, and in 2021, at the age of 50, Phil won the PGA Championship, his 6th major. Then came LIV Golf, the $200 million deal, the Saudi money, the exodus from the PGA Tour. Phil left everything behind. The tour that made him, the fans who cheered him, the reputation he'd spent decades building. Tim eventually stepped away in 2024. Family reasons. Phil got a new caddy, John Yarbrough. And Bones? Bones left Justin Thomas in 2024 too. Mutual decision. He went back to broadcasting. So here we are, almost a decade after that quiet email ended everything. Bones is respected, loved, employed by the biggest network in golf. Phil is still playing, still making money, still Phil. But something is different now, because we know the truth. And here's the thing that should bother every golf fan. This wasn't just about Phil and Bones. It was about a system that treats caddies like disposable accessories. Caddies have no job security, no contracts, no union, no protection. They work on handshakes and trust. And when that trust is broken, they have nowhere to turn. Phil Mickelson made over $96 million in on-course earnings, plus endorsements, plus appearance fees, plus the $200 million LIV deal. He could have paid Bones what he owed without even noticing the hit, but he didn't. He chose not to, and that choice tells you everything about the power dynamic in professional golf. Players hold all the cards, caddies hold the bag, and when the player decides loyalty doesn't matter anymore, the caddy is left holding nothing. Bones got lucky. He had talent. He had connections. He turned a devastating betrayal into a second career. But what about the caddies who don't get that call from NBC? The ones who spend years carrying bags, sacrificing their bodies, their families, only to be discarded when the player decides they're too expensive? They get nothing. They get a handshake and a "thanks for your time." They get told, "We felt it was time for a change." So here's the question I keep coming back to, and I want your honest answer in the comments. Did Bones make the right call by walking away? He could have stayed, could have swallowed his pride, could have accepted the $800,000 and pretended everything was fine, but he didn't. He chose dignity over money. He chose respect over loyalty. He chose himself over the man who had been his everything for 25 years. And isn't that the hardest choice anyone can make? To walk away from something that defined you? To admit that the person you trusted more than anyone else doesn't value you the way you value them? Bones did it quietly, professionally, without drama, without burning bridges. He just left. And in leaving, he exposed something ugly about Phil Mickelson that the PR machine had kept hidden for years. Phil gave a few interviews after the breakup, said he never lost respect for Bones, said Bones was there when his wife Amy was battling cancer, said all the right things. But the money told a different story. The checks told a different story. The absence of an apology, the absence of any attempt to make things right before it was too late. Those silences speak louder than any interview ever could. The partnership that should have been remembered as one of the greatest in golf history is now remembered as a warning. 25 years, 41 wins, 5 majors, a bond that most people only dream of having with anyone. And it ended not with a bang, but with an email, a quiet statement to a few writers, a phone call that never came, a check that was $100,000 short. That's the real story, not the PR spin, not the mutual decision, not the polite fiction. The truth is messier, uglier, more human. Phil Mickelson had everything: money, fame, talent, a loving family, and the most loyal caddy in the history of the sport. And he still managed to lose the one thing that mattered most: the respect of the man who carried his bag for 25 years. Bones Mackay didn't just walk away from a job. He walked away from a life, a partnership, a dream. And he did it because he finally realized that some things are worth more than money. So I'll ask you again, what do you think? Was Bones right to walk away? Drop your take in the comments. And if you made it this far, you're exactly the kind of golf fan this channel is built for. Someone who wants the real stories, the ones the PR machine doesn't want you to hear. Hit that subscribe button, because we've got a lot more stories like this coming. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's next. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.